Hello everyone, welcome back. Today's video is going to be a chill one. I'm just going to sit down with you guys and chat a little bit about the upcoming mid-year migration that a lot of us tend to do in our bullet journals. And I thought I'd share some of the tips that I've kind of gathered over the years and also go through how I like to approach migrating into a new bullet journal and how I like to do it and my really simple and straightforward method. I'm not going to be migrating into a new journal until probably July because I have enough pages to get me through this notebook until then. But I know a lot of people like to migrate in June, so that's why I wanted to make you guys this video now so that you got all the tips before you do your migration. So what I'm going to do, this is my plan, is I'm going to share my tips with you guys and show you a couple of flip throughs of my previous bullet journal setups, just kind of like the first kind of yearly collections and pages, just so that you're not looking at my hands the whole time. And I think that's how we're gonna do it. So let's just get right into the migration tips. Starting with the first tip, this is probably the biggest one, and that is to get realistic and let go of the fantasy self / fantasy journal. So I recently came across the idea of the fantasy self when I was researching capsule wardrobing a while back, and I thought it applied really well to bullet journaling and, you know, kind of having this situation where you have your journal and you have kind of the reality of what works for you. And then you have this fantasy version of your journal that's this really like idealized, perfect version of what you think your journal should look like. And I think the best thing you can do when setting up a new journal mid-year and migrating, or even setting up a journal at the beginning of the year, is to get really clear on what that fantasy journal is and understand how that's different from your actual journal and what you actually enjoy doing and what works for you. So I found the best way to let go of my fantasy journal and get clear on what would be kind of realistic and approachable for me is to first get realistic on my boundaries on time. How much time do I really want to spend using my journal and setting up my journal? And then also knowing what works for you and what you enjoy doing. For a long time, my fantasy journal had a lot of drawing and illustration, and it took me a really long time to realize that that stuff just isn't something I enjoy. So really tapping into what you like versus what you think you should be doing and kind of letting that go and focusing on what works for you. My second tip is don't feel pressured to set up all your collections right away. I know a lot of the yearly setups that you see on YouTube for bullet journals have a lot of different collections that are set up at the beginning, and I also like to set up quite a few collections in my journal. But I would definitely recommend going into a migration, especially if you're new, to really focus on only setting up the collections that you're like 90% sure you'll use or really want to try out. And then you can always set up collections as you go in your journal based on when you need them. I've found in my journal, sometimes I'll set up collections at the beginning of the year that I never end up needing or using further down the line, or I have to add a collection later on because I didn't know that I would need something like that until that time a couple months later. So yeah, don't stress about setting up a bunch of collections. Just set up what you need and then you can add what else you need later down the road. My third tip is to set up a next bullet journal collection at the end of your current journal. This is an idea I got from the creator Jashi Koren on YouTube. I'll link her below. And essentially what you do is you take a page at the very back of your current journal and you use it as kind of a brain dump area for all the ideas and things that you're thinking of including in the next journal. And I really love having this collection. I have it in my journal right now because it allows me to write down ideas as I get them. And then when I go to set up my new journal and migrate, I have all those ideas already there and I'm not kind of under this like time pressure to figure out exactly what I need from my journal. Instead, I have all the things I think I need kind of written out as I thought about them. And I just find allowing yourself lots of time helps you reflect a little more, I don't know, effectively, I guess. And it also just takes off the time pressure, which is really nice. So 10 out of 10 would suggest setting up a next journal collection at the back. That's probably one of my favorite ways to kind of prep for migrations is having one of those ready, and then I can reference my ideas when the migration happens. Next up, my fourth tip is to get clear on the purpose of your journal before searching for inspiration. One of the harder truths about bullet journaling, I like to think, is that the best bullet journal setup for you is probably located in your head and not located on the internet or Pinterest or Instagram. And while those places are really great to get inspiration, I find that they're much easier to get effective inspiration from when you first know what you need in your journal. And I just find when you know the purpose, it's a little harder to get confused and overwhelmed by all the different styles of journaling out there. And in case you're wondering, well, how do I figure out my purpose? How do I figure out what works for you? I find that the best way to do that is to really hone in on doing monthly reflections at the end of the month in your journal, reflecting on, your life that month, but also reflecting on what's working in your journal. And I did these a lot when I first started bullet journaling, and they really helped me figure out what worked for me. All right, the last tip I have is more of a aesthetic one, I guess. This one is to create a formula for your spreads when you're setting up your mid-year journal. When I say formula, it can definitely vary between person. For me, I have kind of a standard header style that I use, that I apply to all my spreads, and because I don't do any decorating really in my journal, that is kind of a good building block that I like to use to make sure that my spreads are not only easy to set up, but also looking consistent. But for you, it might be different. If you like to do art in your journal, maybe it's having a consistent art style that you use, or maybe having a certain color scheme. I don't really do art in my journal, so I feel like you guys might figure that out better than me, but hopefully you can kind of get what I'm saying. Having some kind of plan and structure to follow so that you don't have this giant bout of decision fatigue that I know I've run into a bunch of times when setting up my new journal. And just having the structure there makes it a much more enjoyable process because you kind of have created your own guide to follow, which is really nice. All right, so those were my kind of 5 tips for success when it comes to bullet journal migration. Now I wanted to share with you my approach to migrating into a new bullet journal and how I like to go about it. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but I think it really works, and it's really helped me make sure that I set up bullet journals that really work for me and are really useful tools in my life. So I like to follow 3 main steps. The first step is to review your old bullet journal. The second step is to make a game plan. And the third step is to set up your new journal. And I'll go ahead and break those down a little bit right now. So the first step is to review your old bullet journal. This is definitely probably the most important step. I feel like reflection really gives you a lot of good ideas and directions on where to take your new journal. And what I like to do to review my old journal is I like to just take out a piece of paper and write down what's been working and what hasn't been working in my journal. Alternatively, I'm gonna give some lazy alternatives because sometimes I don't want to do a lot of work before setting up my new journal, depending on how busy life is. So if you don't want to write down a list, what you can also do is just go through your journal and tab off pages that you know you want to migrate, or tab off pages with information that you know you want to migrate into the new journal. That works just as well, and as long as you kind of have an idea of what you're moving over, I feel like you're pretty good to go. After reviewing your journal, then we move into step 2, which is making a game plan. And what I like to do for this is to make a list of spreads that I want to make in the new journal. This is really helpful to do beforehand so that you not only know what things you're going to be making and setting up, but also what I like to do is I like to figure out the order I want to make my spreads, as well as how many pages they're going to take up. So I can go ahead and take that list, put it right beside my new journal, and flip through the initial pages and mark off what spread is going to go where so that, I don't accidentally miss a spread or forget to create something, and it's just kind of all fleshed out in a little mini outline for me to reference. Then, after I have my game plan, I have my spread list in the order they're going in, I then go ahead and set up my new journal. I usually look at my game plan when I'm doing this, and I'll usually either write in pencil the spread on the page that I'm doing, or I'll just mark it off with a sticky note, and then I just go ahead and start creating my collections. I like to try to make sure that when I'm setting up my journal, I have a really chill, cozy environment. I usually try to pick a time on the weekend when I'm off work, just so I can relax and take like a full afternoon to set up my journal if that's what I want to do. And I also like to make sure I have like a nice cup of tea or a warm drink, and I'll usually watch a show in the background, and that's something that I find really fun, and I definitely recommend making the whole process fun. And if it doesn't feel fun, then maybe figure out if you need to kind of take off a couple spreads and make the setup a little lighter so that it is something that's more enjoyable for you. So yeah, that is kind of the process. I know, nothing groundbreaking, but you know, it gets the job done and it works for me and my journal. So I thought I'd share it with you, and hopefully you found it helpful. Let me know if you guys have any tips for my grading, and if you want, maybe share them below so that, you know, we can share our collective knowledge with the crew. And yeah, besides that, that is the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found these tips helpful, and if you're new to migration, I hope that this kind of demystified the process and gave you an idea of where to start. And besides that, I'm gonna get going, and I will see you all in next week's video. Bye!
Hello, Ramona. I can't shake the simplest feeling beyond the ghost. We stand on the opposite shore. Hello, Ramona. I reach through mysterious